You are listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 26, The Internet of Things. On today's show, we talk to Steve Fowler about all the wearable tech out there, and we try to figure out whether it has any use for archaeologists. Let's get to the show. All right, welcome to the show, everyone. Chris, how's it going? You're in a different location yet again.
Yep, I'm mobile. I'm reporting from Louisville, Kentucky.
All right, and we may have a special guest in the background named Toby, from what I understand. He's already made somewhat of an appearance on the show.
Yeah, I think the mailman's left, so we're safe. We're also joined by Steve Fowler, who's also in Louisville, Kentucky. How's it going, Steve?
Going well, Chris. Just glad that while I'm in Louisville, I'm in a different physical location than you. But yeah, other than that, I'm good to go.
Nice. You guys are in the same city and you couldn't manage to be in the same location. Nice.
Again, intentional, but yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, I understand that. Yeah. No. So anyway, if Steve sounds familiar at all, for anybody who actually listens to this show, he was on episode 17, which I think was last November or December, where we talked about virtual reality. So Steve's back on to talk about some more internet type things and possibly some virtual reality, and we'll just see where that goes. But right now we're going to talk about the Internet of Things and how this applies to archaeology and what the heck it even is. But first, Steve, why don't you remind everybody who you are and what you do and what you got going on?
Sure thing. Well, I'm in business development here at Interapt. We are a mobile and wearable technology firm. We work with businesses and just try and see how they can leverage mobile or wearable technology and sort of next generation technology to solve some of their business problems. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Well, why don't you give us your definition on what the Internet of Things is, or are, I guess, and I think this includes, correct me if I'm wrong, pretty much all wearable technology. So wearable technology, Internet of Things, it's all kind of one and the same as far as I understand.
Well, it can be. The term is predicated on whatever device you're talking about actually being connected to a network. So that's the idea. The Internet of Things, of course, is a network of things. They could be devices. So for example, they could be a sensor. A sensor is collecting data at all times, and where does that data go? Well, if it's connected to the internet, then it can go somewhere where you store it and eventually access it later, or you can access it in real time if it's in the cloud. This thing could be a device that someone inputs information into. So it could be a smartphone. Or it could be something in between. So it could be a thermostat, like a Nest smart thermostat. It's something that is, detecting what the temperature is, but it's also controlling your AC, and it also interacts with an app that you have on your phone that you can control, remotely. So that's sort of the best way I can describe what the Internet of Things is. It's anything that's connected to a larger network, whether that's a device or something that's more passive.
So does that have to be something that you can't? Well, you included more passive right at the last second there, because I was going to ask you about something like those Philips smart bulbs and things like that you don't actually you don't actually do anything with in your living room, but you can cause them to do things based on what's going on online.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you one thing I've been always looking forward to, and this is very domestic of me, but is a freaking washing machine that will send me a push notification when it's done. Okay, and I know those are coming out, but they're still like the high end washers and dryers. But
right. And that I can see that being obviously a benefit if you have a really busy schedule, you have other things going on, and you're trying to multitask, which we are that generation now that's what we do. We have our phone out or whatever while we're watching TV and our tablets in our lap. So it's just that multitasking generation. So that makes sense. The way that I approach that now is so I have a smartwatch, an Apple Watch, and whenever I put a load of laundry in, there's a really quick way for me to set the timer on the watch. So I just do that. And then, whenever it's done, my wrist, vibrates and I know it's time to go, get the laundry. So there's any number of ways to take care of that.
Well, I do the exact same thing with my Apple Watch and, setting the timer exactly for laundry, as a matter of fact. In fact, when we were on this last project we were on, the laundry room was outside of the apartment we had rented and was, down over in the courtyard. So I couldn't even hear a buzzer go off if one was going to happen. So having that timer set, perfectly right there was perfect. And I'm glad you segued into the Apple Watch, because I was going to do just that as one of the first things we're going to talk about, which is not just the Apple Watch, but smartwatches in general, because I think smartwatches are probably the easiest thing for people to understand is now, a wearable tech or Internet of Things type device. And really because they can interact with, really anything that has an app out there these days. It might not have an Apple Watch direct connection to it, but there might be some other way you could connect to it through your Apple Watch as well. And one, I just got to say, one app that I just heard about today, and I downloaded it to check it out. And it's a little creepy the way these things are going, but it's called Just Record, and it's actually called Just Press Record on their website. And by the way, everything we talk about will be in the show notes for today. But Just Record even has what Apple calls a complication, which means when you have a customized watch face, some of the some of the little areas where you can put things, you can put something directly related to a third-party application, and for some reason they call that a complication. I don't know if that's a developer term or what, but. So I did that, and now in the lower left-hand side of my Apple Watch display, there's a little microphone. And if I press that, it will instantly start recording from my Apple Watch whatever it can hear. So if I'm having a conversation with somebody, and I just hit that little record button, and it starts recording, when I tap it to stop it, it instantly saves it to my phone, and then which is saved to iCloud, actually. So somebody could... as long as it has a couple seconds to upload to iCloud, I could lose my phone and my watch within seconds of making that recording, and I've still got them in the cloud. And I tried it out. It's a pretty clear recording, actually. I had my arm just hanging to my side, and I was speaking, and I could still hear myself really well on that recording from the Apple Watch. So, little things like that you got to watch out for. I was just telling somebody the other day that who's kind of a Luddite. In fact, he's still got a flip phone, and he was saying, "Oh, I don't want one of those," because he actually downgraded the new TV he was going to buy because it came with a camera and a microphone. And he's like, I don't know about that. I was like, well, we're sitting in a Starbucks and I'm just looking around me and it was full. And I was like, there's probably 10 smartphones that can hear everything you're saying right now. Whether or not they're listening doesn't really matter, but they can hear you, right? And I was like, you just have to assume that these days that you're being listened to. And not to get, again, too creepy on this, but one of the things I can see as a benefit to Archaeology for this Just Record app is you might not want to be sitting there taking, obvious notes or something like that because you're distracting yourself when you're talking to a client or you're out in the field and somebody comes up to you. I don't know how many times we've been, just run up on by a rancher or something like that. That's like, what the hell are you guys doing out here? And it'd be nice to have a recording of that little interaction sometimes.
Yeah.
Chris, I'm sure
a few times.
Yeah.
Chris has told me of a few encounters, we'll call them. With people on sites.
Exactly. If you're trying to do that with your phone, it might be a little too obvious, but smartwatches are still a little bit innocuous for most people, and they can do that. Which honestly, it reminds me of another device I saw, and I can't remember the name of it because I just remembered it. But it's a little ring that you wear in your finger, and it just looks like a ring. But when you tap it or you move your wrist just the right way, it's always listening and it's always recording. But when you tap your wrist, it takes the last minute of whatever it records and sends it immediately to your smartphone. So you don't have to. Yeah, you don't have to activate it to record. It just saves the last minute. So, yeah, again.
Yeah, so we're at kind of a tipping point right now, culturally speaking, because while you're right that a lot of us still have that aversion to, being listened to the entire time or being recorded, whether it's on camera or whether it's audio, we're also shifting into the smart home, and that involves products like, I don't know if you've heard of Alexa, that's Amazon's. Speaking product. So it's a smart home product that you can literally talk to. I'm sure people have seen the commercials with Alec Baldwin and whatnot, and they've really marketed it pretty heavily as the next big thing. And like Steve Wozniacki, for example, a co-founder of Apple, agrees that it's probably it's just where everything is going, and it's one of his favorite devices. So people are getting used to now the convenience of having an always-on microphone in their home, but clearly that comes with some, like you said, a little bit of trepidation on the part of some people.
Well, on the off chance that any of our listeners have an Alexa device in their home right now and they're not listening to this on headphones, Alexa, play songs by Justin Bieber.
Alexa, order me a pizza from Domino's right now.
Alexa, send me an Uber.
Oh Jesus! Nice,
Oh,
but these are most of these what we just said you can actually do with Alexa, which is pretty awesome. And I hear it's got like Audible integration, like if you were listening to an audiobook on your phone on your way in on your Bluetooth, and then in your car, you can come in and say Alexa, continue reading my book, and it will just read your book, out loud to you. If it or play the Audible file or read your ebook or something like that. So, and then Alexa's got integration with all kinds of other things too. So it's really kind of taken the market by storm as far as home automation goes. So, and some other things. Well, before we get away from the Apple Watch, I was going to ask you, Steve, do you have any apps that you really find yourself using all the time that aren't like native Apple applications for your watch?
I can't say that I am. I think Apple Watch has a little work to do to get the native apps to be very useful and intuitive. I think they're kind of working all that out. But really, what it's been most useful for me is just showing me notifications from any app, really, that I can just look down and glance at, because honestly, like, I hate pulling out my phone every single time it vibrates or beeps or something like that just to see what's going on. So that's the number one convenience that it has for me. I haven't really explored too much of non-native applications in Apple Watch because I don't know. It's got a ways to go before I think it's really going to get more traction and people are going to feel like it's really more effortless to use it.
Mm-hmm. Well, I agree. And some of the things, I mean, a lot of what I use on the Apple Watch, quite honestly, are native Apple functions. Like I get rid of my Fitbit, and I just use the Apple's fitness tracking stuff now. Although that's still kind of confusing too, because if you got a smartphone, you've got your iPhone, and you've got your Apple Watch. Like, they're both recording steps, but which one is sending information to which application, and which one counts, and stuff like that. And I don't really understand that still, but.
No, yeah, and honestly, the one thing I was surprised about is how Fitbit's interface is really refined and it's really nice looking and easy to use and all that. And Apple's is just not.
Yeah.
Whereas Apple design used to be the sort of benchmark, but they've got some catching up to do in terms of fitness apps, if you ask me.
Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah.
It's really confusing. And if anybody's listening to this on the day that this comes out, which is next Monday, the 21st of March, this might all be a slightly moot point because we might be hearing about the Apple Watch 2 on that day. It'll be in the next month or two. I can't imagine they'll have another event for it, but they might. But Apple's having an event on March 21st where they're going to, well, who knows what they're going to talk about, but there's a lot of speculation. So, yeah, anyway, I had a list of Apple Watch apps that we might talk about, things that'd be good for archaeology, but I think we might come back to those if we get time, because I really kind of want to talk about devices and other things. So from sort of the home automation side of things, and I thought about using this for, and I don't know if the particular one I have would be good, but I thought about using this for like hotel rooms, or definitely like we had an apartment rented for 6 months at the last project I was on, but the August lock and then other things like that. These are smart locks. It's nice because somebody else has a key to your place, right? Whether it's the hotel or whether it's whoever you're renting from or something like that. And this doesn't prevent them from coming in, but it does make a record of when somebody came in. So somebody can't just come in without your notice. Even if they use the key to open the lock, there will be a record of that. So, and some of these locks, these fancy locks out there that might require a little bit more hardware because they hook on the outside of the door, include cameras and all kinds of stuff. So like the Ring doorbell, I think, is something you can just hook on the outside of your door. And I mean, it records audio, video, everything of anybody that just, rang your doorbell. And you can open up your smartphone app anytime you want and just see if there's anybody outside your door,
Right. And the marketing for that product, actually, they say that most people who rob homes will knock on the door first or ring the doorbell to see if anybody's home, and it'll be in broad daylight. It'll be, usually when people are away and working. And so that they're marketing it as this is going to solve this problem for you by allowing you to be remotely present at your home if somebody knocks on the door. So there are definitely benefits in terms of safety.
Right, because somebody can ring your doorbell, your app sends you a notification, you open it up, and you can answer them audibly and say, "Hey, I'm I'm indisposed right now, just leave the package at the door or something like that, or I
Sure.
can't come to the door right now. And they think you're inside. They have no idea that you're, sitting on a beach in Tahiti.
Right. And yeah, and even if you can't respond in real time, you still have both a visual and audio record of somebody coming into the house or coming up to the front door. So you have something to work with.
Yeah, indeed. Chris, I didn't prompt you for this in the back chat, but have you heard of anything lately, like any sort of wearable tech or anything that you're interested in?
Well, it's related to, I guess, the Nest, and it's a little bit of a tangent to what we're talking about right now, but it's something that I'd like to come back around to maybe later on in the show. I've seen a product, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but it's this product that I saw advertised in New Zealand where you just stick it onto any air conditioning unit magnetically, and you don't even have to like get into the circuitry or anything. The way like, Nest, you've got to like, rewire your thermostat and stuff like that. This thing, you just like slap it on, and then it's like plug and play. You can start controlling your thermostat with that.
Wow.
And you can set patterns of behavior, and it can kind of like learn your activity and also learn the weather, and it'll help you be more efficient with how you're using energy to heat and cool your house. And so us as archaeologists and us as like humans, it's just interesting to talk about like mobility and also like resource use, and how the Internet of Things is really changing our mobility and our resource use. So we'll talk about some more things about the Internet of Things and technology, and then we can see how the rest of this fits into, how we are behaving as humans.
Do you remember what that thing was called?
No, but I'm going to look it up and put it in the show notes.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, because I'm interested in that too. That'd be great for certain things where you can't like actually change the hardware, something you're renting or something like that. All right, sweet. Some other things. There was one other thing I was looking at when I was researching this episode that we can get into. We're just kind of taking a broad look at all this stuff in the first segment here. So we've talked about some household technology. We've talked about some stuff you can actually wear, like the Apple Watch and things like that, and then some other devices. But there's also actual wearable technology that aren't like watches. Like one of the ones I found is called Hexoskin, HEXOSKIN. It's wearable body metrics. These are shirts and I think pants. I'm not really sure. But they've got devices inside them. Now, this stuff is super expensive. And I imagine your average field tech is not going to go out and buy this stuff. Like this Hexoskin full kit shirt thing here is like $400. But it comes with... But they take all these crazy metrics on your body, while you're wearing them. And I can see the utility for somebody who's really interested in understanding a little bit more about how their body's working, and especially if you're working in an area where the weather is really challenging, or the environment is really challenging, and you really maybe you've got some actual issues like a medical condition or something where you need to closely monitor your body and what's going on, not just your pulse like you can do with a smartwatch, but more than that. And this
well, don't
nice.
Underestimate how this could apply to athletics as well. Athletics is a big revenue generator. So if you can all of a sudden train using this kind of technology, you collect more data, you learn how to train people better, that becomes really valuable.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, stuff like that. And then, you've of course got all the things you always hear about that they're doing over in like Japan, putting LEDs and stuff like that on shirts. I'm not sure if I count that, but who knows?
I got light up sneakers. What do you?
Nice. The original wearable tech is those light up sneakers, right?
Yeah, the LA gear.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, one other. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say that this is the natural progression of technology getting smaller, lighter, cheaper to produce, and able to collect more data.
Mm-hmm.
Putting it in clothing is just a natural next step, because it's sort of like, and this is ironic considering the cultural backlash against Google Glass, but part of the tagline of Google Glass was getting technology out of the way, right?
Mm-hmm.
The goal of any great technology is for you to not even realize that it's there until the moment you need it, and then be able to access whatever data or function or feature that you need in that moment, and then be able to have it not in your way for the rest of your, time, your life that you're living.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just a natural next step. Putting it in clothing is going to not just track, your body, like this says heart rate, breathing rate, the activities and things like that. But you're going to store all that data somewhere, and then you're going to know, like your location or how, the elevation, all these different things that you can suddenly know about your life and what you're doing and your activity. And it's a lot of information overload, because what do we do with all this data? So, go ahead.
Yeah, that's one thing I want to talk about when we come back from the break is among other things, is what do we do with all this data, and exactly what you said, emphasizing the fact that this isn't, these things shouldn't be a hindrance on what you're doing. They shouldn't really be an addition to, something else you've got to think about. It should help you in something that you're doing, and make your life easier, really. And if it's not, then you're either doing it wrong or you've got the wrong piece of gear, as far as I can tell. So let's take a short break, and then we'll come right back and continue talking about this. Hey everyone, I'm here with Dan Bigman of Bigman Geophysical with an awesome special offer for APN listeners. Dan, what have you got for us?
Well, for the past year, I've been everywhere I've went. People have requested training on ground penetrating radar, and they've all voiced concerns that there's nowhere to get accessible quality training for a really reasonable price. So what Bigman Geophysical is doing is we're going to put on a 3-part webinar series on GPR basics, ground penetrating radar basics. That's going to take place Mondays, April 18th, April 25th, and May 2nd, 2016. In this course, we're going to break it into 3 parts. Part 1 is going to go over basic concepts and theory of ground penetrating radar. Part 2 is going to talk about processing data, visualizing data, and GPR data interpretation. And then part 3 is going to be all about case studies and applications of ground penetrating radar to several different industries, including archaeology.
And how long does each class period last?
So each class period is going to have a live section on Monday. For each of those Mondays, it's going to be about an hour and 15 to an hour and a half of class time. And then there's going to be additional time for question and answers throughout each course. What we're also going to do is do an unlimited replay for each topic for each week from Wednesday to Sunday. So if you miss it or you want to see it again, which we hope you do, then you'll be able to log into a special website and replay the webinar.
And how much is this going to cost us?
So the regular price of this webinar is $299. And what we're going to do for APN listeners as a special deal is give a 25% discount for the first 7 days that we're running registration. So that's going to go from March 7th till March 14th at 8 p.m. Eastern time for that 25% discount. After that, we're still going to give APN listeners a discount that's just for them. That's going to be 10%. But if you really want to get in this for relatively inexpensive, then the 25% off is going to give you a rate of $225 for the course.
So where can people go to sign up for this class?
They just have to pop over to bigmangeophysical.com/APN to get the special rate. That's bigmangeophysical.com/APN. And there they can sign up and go to a secure website to enter all their information and get that 25% off.
So whether you're a seasoned archaeologist or just getting started, this course will really be an asset for everyone. Head over to bigmangeophysical.com/APN, or you can click through from the APN website at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com to get your 25% off today. All right, we're back, and over the break, we were talking a little more about what Steve brought up right at the end. There is what do we do with all this data? I want to bring that up specifically because some people get these things, whatever that may be. Usually it's tracking devices and stuff like that. Fitness devices are a notorious one. When I had a Fitbit, I was for a time there, not every day, of course, but for a long time, one of the things I liked about the Fitbit was it really gamified fitness, and not just for yourself, but for the community. So the Fitbit app on my iPhone was really crucial to me using the Fitbit because I'm a competitive person, and it's not just enough for me to say, oh, if I get 10,000 steps a day, I actually ended up increasing it to 15,000. If I get this many steps a day, I'll be healthier. I didn't care about that. I wanted to beat somebody. So, I belong to a group of archaeologists on Fitbit, and I still do because my iPhone actually sends my steps to the Fitbit app. it's not nearly as accurate, but I can still participate. But it sends me to this group of archaeologists, and I can see other field archaeologists from around the country and possibly the world. I'm not sure who is even in there. And I can see, you can always tell when somebody issues a challenge on Fitbit. You can always tell when they're about to go do survey, because they're like, oh, let me challenge everybody to a week's worth of steps, and they're about to go walk 10 miles a day. So, I'm not sure how fair that is, but I used to use mine as well when I really wanted to hit that goal every day. I would look at it if it was, and it resets at midnight, and if it was 11 o'clock and I had 1,000 steps to go, my wife called it my fitness shuffle, because I know we had a time when we were just staying up late doing stuff. So I would just walk back and forth around the house. I'd put headphones on, or I'd grab my iPad and I'd read a book while I was doing it, and I would just walk until I got my steps, and it would buzz on my wrist when I got my steps. And I do the same thing with my Apple Watch now. One of my complications, as we mentioned earlier, is the little fitness ring that they've got, which, say what you will about accuracy, I still use it as a metric for what I'm doing. And I like the simplicity of just looking at the rings, and I can tell the 3 different metrics that it records. How have I progressed in that goal? Now, like we were saying, you really have to use this information. Now, my wife had a Fitbit the whole time I did, and now she's got an Apple Watch too. And sure, she looks at the data, but she doesn't do anything about it. The data doesn't motivate her to, get up and go do some exercise or do something like that. So, you got to find the technology that actually enhances or augments your life. And if it doesn't, then it's just a waste of time. Now, of course, she uses the Apple Watch for other things, but not for fitness, which is why I wanted to get her that, because the Fitbit wasn't doing her any good. She was just putting it on every day and could care less that she didn't make her steps. She was just recording it for no reason. and that's, yeah.
No, actually, what you bring up is it kind of answers your own question, because when you're talking about what do you do with the data that you have, well, now that we're collecting more data with more devices at the same time, that all of a sudden some of this becomes more relevant, because you can look at it from a macro perspective. All right.
Mm-hmm.
So think of it like if your wife could take or you could take all of your exercise or fitness data and then map it against something else, maybe when you were sick, or when you were, feeling whatever, feeling a different kind of wellness, or when other things happen, like whenever you go to a concert, or when you do things that you do regularly, you see, oh, suddenly my level of activity goes up X number. You start learning things about like your habits and your behaviors when you actually apply other things to it and think of it on different levels, and you start seeing correlation. And you start seeing all this, all of a sudden it opens up this sort of Pandora's box of, oh my gosh, there's like everything affects everything else. It's the world, like type of discovery. But again, as more things collect data, as in more individual devices collect data in concert, then individually they become more valuable, because they all become part of, again, a network or an internet of things, if you will.
Yeah, that's totally right. But the question too becomes, you got all these separate things, and this is another problem that we have, is I've got one thing recording data, I've got another thing recording data, I've got another thing recording data, and we're talking about the connectivity of all this stuff. Sure, it's all connected to the internet, but half these things aren't connected to themselves, which is also a problem. Because like you said, taking these metadata, like for example, I use an app called Sleep Cycle to, for when I sleep. It's on my iPhone. You have to plug it in. You usually have to plug in your phone because your battery will die, and then you turn on Sleep Cycle and you lay it. I lay it right next to my pillow, kind of under my pillow on my bed. The nice thing about Sleep Cycle, because I often used to forget to do this, is it's an automatic do not disturb for your iPhone. So you won't get any notifications throughout the night. You won't get any emails. So if you use that, keep that in mind. The emergency stuff will still get through, just like Apple's notification system lets through. But all the regular stuff won't come through. So that's nice. But what Sleep Cycle does, first off, among other things, if I set the alarm for 5 a.m., I've got the buffer set for a half an hour. So it'll actually start monitoring my movements at 4:30. And if I start getting a little restless, well, it'll just start waking me up naturally when I want to wake up. If I don't move at all, move a muscle, then it won't wake me up until 5 o'clock. But if I start getting a little restless, because, everybody wakes up a little bit before their alarm comes off, then it'll send a gentle alarm. And it's a pre-snooze, basically, which I love, because anybody who doesn't set, if you need to actually wake up at 5, you can set it for 5, and then, it'll pre-snooze you. That way you're up at 5. You're not snoozing until 5:30 when you're supposed to be walking out of the house at 5:35. So, But anyway, the point of that is when you end a sleep cycle, it asks you certain things, and it says, how did you sleep last night? How did you wake up? And then it says the day before. I think actually when you start sleep cycle, it asks this, and you can customize these things. You can say, did I drink coffee today? Did I drink tea today? Did I exercise today? Did I eat late? Did I do something else? And you can add any one of these metrics. So I can look back at my data for the last year and a half and say, well, I only got 4 hours of sleep quality measured at 62%, average anytime I drank coffee late at night or something like that. But I can't take those data and use them with anything else. It's separate data from, say, my Apple data that I'm collecting from my smartwatch or anything like that. So that's something I hope improves sometime in the near future.
I think it will, and the reason actually has to do with an industry that we're pretty heavily involved in right now, and that's healthcare. At the recent HIMSS conference in Las Vegas, one of the main topics there was something called interoperability. I don't know if you've heard of that or not, but basically, what's happening is we're sort of at I guess you would call it a tipping point right now in healthcare where patient information is being stored on these EHRs, these EMRs, and now patients want to, they want to own that data and be able to take it from place to place. They want to be able to go to a different hospital and pull up all of their old records. But they want to, they want to have it on their own device. They want to have access to it. There's all kinds of complications when it comes to privacy laws, HIPAA, and all these other sort of regulations around the protection of patient information. But ultimately, what it's coming around to is, hospitals and health systems have to figure out how they're going to work together, which is it's an inherent problem when you're competing with most of these other health systems. But they're kind of coming around to the fact that we have to figure this out because healthcare will be stagnant unless we understand how we can take this data more efficiently, disperse it between facilities and between patients and doctors and nurses and all the different people who need to access this data quickly and for it to be accurate and reliable. And so that's a really big topic for healthcare right now. They're like, oh, this is great. We're getting more information than we ever have, but now we need to know how to store it, manage it, analyze it, and then make it available for people to use. And so that's where interoperability comes into play.
Well, that's a good point too, and that's another avenue you could use all this data that you're just collecting with your different apps. Like I can take my watch data and my which is recording my my heart rate every so often throughout the day, things like that. I can take that and I can take the data from Sleep Cycle, and if I've got something going on with me that I just don't understand and the doctor doesn't understand either, I can just bring in a USB stick with all my data on and say, here, see what you can make out of this. It might become useful later, just like all the data we collect on an archaeological site. Sometimes you don't know whether or not it's going to be useful at all to anyone, but we collect it. So perhaps later on in the future, with a different analytical method or something like that, the data becomes useful. So, but if you never collected it to begin with, how would you know? So,
and I mean, there's something to be said about intentionally collecting data for future use. And there's a whole science behind data collection and being theoretically driven by research questions and stuff like that. And I think that Steve has touched on a few points about how managing metadata and being able to effectively query and present this data is going to be really useful in the future. But I think also this abundance of data is going to possibly change how we think about theoretically driving data collection. And so it'll be interesting because like a few years ago, we suffered from really a lack of data, and there was really the technology to present figures and stuff with, GIS and metadata driving demographic statistics and human behavior and other environmental variables. Now we have this abundance of data. And so now, to come back to our question that we opened the segment with, it's like, what do we do with it? So it'll be cool to see, this feedback loop of, constant adjustments in the way we manage data and the way we think about collecting data, not just the data that we're collecting.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be dictated by what we mentioned earlier. And we mentioned it during the break, and I believe we mentioned it in the last podcast that I was a guest of. And that is then one of the next barriers, the big barriers, the frontiers in computer science, or maybe just in all science, is how do we efficiently access and pull from a very large data set. It's because, like you just said, like all these things now we're collecting more than ever. Yeah, I do believe I mentioned that. I believe because last time I mentioned some insane statistic in that in 2013, like we collected more data than we had in all of recorded history. I think it was something like that, and that was 3 years ago. So now it's even more, and so that's sort of the next challenge for physicists really and scientists to understand how do we make chips, how do we make processors, how do we make processing speed faster, how do we do all these things and functions that will grab what you absolutely need in terms of the granular data from an unbelievably large data set in as quickly as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes me think of two quick points. One, a lot of people think about the Library of Alexandria and what a shame it is that it was burned to the ground. I think that it's an amazing time that we're alive right now. Like you said, Steve, we collected more data than all of human history combined. We have the Library of Alexandria right now with all of our data. And in fact, a lot of times it's sitting in our pocket and we're wearing it. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's just amazing. Once again, what do we do with it and how are we using it? And then the other thing is to bring it back to anthropology. With the way that we study human behavior and all that, I think that it's going to be a really interesting field for anthropologists to be entering into with all of the tech, managing information, computer sciences, and also the health fields. There's going to be so much interdisciplinary collaboration with all of the different skill sets that we work with. It's like everything interacts with everything else, and it's like you said earlier, everything is connected to everything.
Yeah, absolutely, guys. All right, I want to bring this back to archaeology just a little bit here, and talk about some of the what's possible type of stuff. And there's probably some apps and devices currently doing this as well. I'm actually aware of some of these things that we've got ideas for, but I do have some slight insight into some things that will be coming out soon, so people can start thinking about what's possible and what they can do with it. Like, for example, something as simple as let's say almost everybody out there has a smartphone in their pocket, right? At least probably people listening to this podcast have a smartphone in their pocket. And that smartphone these days, every single smartphone has a GPS inside of it, and every single smartphone has accelerometers inside of it. So these phones, whether or not they're actually using certain bits of data, they're always aware of data. Like, for example, when you start moving, or when you start moving at a higher rate of speed, or when you you move from one location to another. I know with the increased battery efficiency and things like that, my iPhone 6s Plus constantly knows where I'm at, because it knows when I'm within 30 feet of my front door and my door unlocks, right? And I don't have to tell it that. I don't have to turn on the location. It just knows because it's always looking, right? So, and not only that, with that August smart lock, that's not connected to Wi-Fi. That's connected to Bluetooth, which I like. So somebody would have to hack in through Bluetooth to open your door or steal my phone. Or because it's not connected to Wi-Fi. You can connect them to Wi-Fi, but mine's not. So my phone knows where I'm at, and then actually activates the Bluetooth, connects to the lock, and unlocks it usually about 4 or 5 seconds before I actually grab for the door handle, which is pretty awesome. But anyway, what I'm talking about that is, the reason I'm talking about that is there's other things like for archaeology and any job really, we often have to record things like mileage and stuff like that. So you could set an app up to say, my workday is generally this time. So anytime you sense my phone accelerating, at a high rate of speed or something like that, or faster than walking speed, means I just got into the truck. So, record my start time for work and record my end time for work when I stop, or something like that, or just pure drive time. But little things like that are the kind of things that this stuff will be able to start being an advantage for us.
Yeah.
So, one of the things that we talked about earlier was, some of these different connected devices not being able to talk to each other. There's workarounds for that, of course. And one of those things is an app called IFTTT, and that stands for if this, then that. And that's a simple logic statement, really. And what IFTTT does, I mean, when this started a few years ago, there was, like 5 things connected to it. Now you can connect up to, probably a couple hundred things to it. And everything from the Philips smart bulbs we mentioned earlier to the to like my Nest thermostat. Let me give you an idea, and I just mentioned location services on my phone. Let me give you an idea about how I use the Nest thermostat with IFTTT. My wife likes to have it way warmer in this house than I do. So when I was working over the summer, she would have the thermostat minimum, because you can set the thermostat to come on, to turn the AC on at a certain low temperature or at a certain high temperature, and to turn the heat on at a certain low temperature, right? So she'd have the high set to like 80 degrees or something like that. And I'm like, I don't think so. And even if she's got it like in the mid 70s, in the midday, I'm like, that's too much for me. So I set a geofence up around the house using IFTTT, which means anytime I came within about 15 miles of the house, it would reduce the temperature on the Nest thermostat to 65 degrees and turn on the air conditioning. So by the time I got home, it was 65 degrees. And it was pretty awesome, I have to say.
So what you're saying is IFTTT is saving your marriage.
Well, it's saving it from my standpoint. She doesn't like it. She knows I'm on my way home when the AC kicks on in the middle of the day. But that's the kind of things that these can do. And there's so many more applications out there like that. I mean, generally, if it connects to the internet, IFTTT is trying to figure out a way to integrate with it. And, some of the other things they're doing, like especially with smart bulbs, like those Philips bulbs and some others, you can have that Philips light bulb, change colors or flash or something like that when the stock market, S&P 500 goes positive for the day or something like that. Or you can have it change colors when the weather changes outside, or automatically dim inside your living room when it gets dark out, or something like that. I saw an integration that the light bulb would flash when the International Space Station flew overhead. I mean, how wild is that? So,
yeah. Wow.
And I use it for other stuff too. That's a little more, I don't know, a little more work appropriate. There's often people will put up like photos of projectile points online. And a lot of times when I was doing that, I would do hashtag PPT. Now, we're not going to get into an argument over East Coast versus West Coast and PPKs versus PPTs, but either way, I know. We're not even going to have that conversation right here, Chris. So anyway,
I want to have it.
Yeah. Anyway, I would do hashtag PPT on Instagram. And every time I did that, all my stuff on Instagram automatically goes to Twitter when I set it up. So IFTTT, while it wouldn't integrate with Instagram, it integrates with Twitter. So it would take anything I hashtagged, hashtag PPT, and drop it into a separate note in a notebook I designated on Evernote. So I've got a notebook on Evernote that's just all the projectile points I've taken pictures of, and I didn't have to curate that anyway, especially. It just does it automatically with the text of the tweet. So you can set that up for anything. I actually had it for a little while, taking anybody that used hashtag archaeology and added them automatically to a list of Twitter followers, or a list of people that tweet about archaeology. That got to be insane because so many people out there that aren't archaeologists use hashtag archaeology, and that list grew to like 5,000 people in like 4 days. So,
hey, well, at least they know how to spell it.
Yeah,
well, I guess so.
About
yeah.
it.
Yeah, exactly. But it's stuff like that, and really, there's a lot of pre-sorted sort of recipes you can do with IFTTT. But really, kind of looking at what you have and what you can integrate with it. And when they gained the ability about a year ago to use native, like I know iPhone does it. I don't know about other phones, but native iPhone functions like push notifications and location services and SMS text messaging and things like that. It got insane. I mean, I can have this thing send my wife a text message when I leave city limits or something like that for some weird reason, like she knows I'm out of town or something like that, and I don't have to deal with it. So it's pretty crazy the way all this stuff integrates. You guys got any final thoughts on some of this?
I agree that it's, though hearing you talk about it, I know I should really look into it more. But I think that IFTTT is an example of a platform that's going to be even leveraged even more moving forward than it is now, because a couple of reasons. One, what we've been talking about this whole time, there are just more devices that are being connected to the internet, so it's gonna be able to dip its hand into more of your daily life and your behavior. But number two is because coding is simply being looked at as a necessity from an education standpoint, and that's basically what you're doing. You're writing logic, and you're coding or hacking your daily routine, if you will. And so that's, kids growing up right now are learning it like it's just another language. And it's going to be more natural for them to want to do that, to say, I want all of my little apps and devices and things to communicate and do what I want them to do, and here's how I'm going to engineer that. Using IFTTT and similar platforms.
Steve, I've got a question for you, and I'm sure that the place that is your office is drastically different than the place that is an office for other kinds of companies. But since you work with tech, have you seen the Internet of Things change the way you guys operate in the office space?
I can't. I mean, of course, other than the fact that that's just what we do, that we work in the technology field, I can't say that it has changed the work behavior that we have here. There are many of us who have smartwatches. Of course, all of us have smartphones. And we all have experience with things like glass and other wearables and augmented reality, virtual reality. But other than just from a business perspective and just an interesting sort of personal use, no, I wouldn't say that it's really changed our work behavior, so to speak.
Interesting. Well, I asked that because I know that Chris and I are both avid and outspoken opponents of offices. And so with the Internet of Things and all of this interoperability and the ability to control things remotely, it'll be interesting. And I think maybe we can talk about this in a future episode of possibly the CRM Archaeology podcast, of, like how connected devices and increased mobility is going to change how we operate as a business in archaeology and the spaces that we occupy in archaeology. So I don't know. Like,
okay,
do we?
So I'm sorry. I'll amend my answer a little bit, because I know what you were going for, and that's sort of the remote office. Which, when you say Internet of Things, I don't think of like remote, like a video conference as being something like an Internet of Things. But we definitely do a lot of remote meetings. We work a lot off-site. It's not quite necessary for us to be in the same physical location for us to get our work done. In fact, it makes us a lot more efficient when we can have these meetings. And clients, by and large, actually are really on board with teleconferencing and doing that. I think they're really kind of that adoption is happening in every industry, even things that you think like legacy industries, whether it's a plumber or somebody, whoever it might be. There's people who are now using teleconferencing to make the traditional office space sort of moot, if you will.
Yeah.
Well, Chris, you'll be possibly disappointed to hear this. I don't know, but I'm reading a book right now talking about it's The Innovators by Walter Isaacson, and it's all about the formation of the internet and stuff like that, and not only just the internet but computers in general. And I see a lot of value in having a common space for people to meet in sometimes, especially when they need to be creative. I'm still generally opposed to having an office for a straight up archaeology firm, because most of the time you just don't need that. And honestly, but to have that, going back to that, to have that collaboration, to have those chance meetings where, you can see somebody who's maybe even in a different department and have a chance meeting and talk about something where you wouldn't have that if you're just working from home virtually. Yeah. Now, that being said, I still don't think they need to have offices. And for the same price of having an office and even renting equipment and filling it with all this office equipment, you could take even a week out of every month and take that cost of renting that office and have a company retreat somewhere where everybody's in the same location and just cramming out some stuff that needs to be done for the next month, something like that, which would be way more fun because you could move it to different places. I mean, one of the places I worked before I started my own thing, they were paying $6,000 a month for office space, and that's not including utilities. That was just
Good
the rent.
grief.
Yeah. Imagine where you could go for $6,000 a month.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, well, I guess a caveat to what I said is like, I think that, even though I'm not a big fan of offices
Mm-hmm.
for archaeology, I am a big fan of FaceTime together. So, like, working with you in California as an example, even though DigTech didn't have a headquartered office that's a permanent building, we did have a field office. And so I think that, a mobile point where everybody can come together, collaborate, voice their ideas, download their data together, stuff like that. I think that's useful. And, it's definitely not a one size fits all thing. There are like massive companies that just simply need to have, like you said, like all the departments
Mm-hmm.
able to, have one hand talk to the other.
Right. All right. Well, we're going to wrap this discussion right here because I think we could continue for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
But we're gonna cut this right here and come back with our apps of the episode. We still got to come up with a good name for this segment. But anyway, we'll come back with that.
Profiles in CRM, a weekly podcast. Ask CRM professionals 8 simple questions. The first questions establish education, location, and experience. The last questions are a reflection of that experience, and the answers will surprise you. Check out the show on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/profiles. On that page, you can also request to be interviewed for the show. It only takes 20 minutes, and you don't need any special equipment. Let's get back to the show.
All right, we're back, and we're going to talk about a couple apps that, really have not a whole lot to do with the Internet of Things. But either way, I feel like we covered that during our discussion with some of because nearly everything we talked about had an associated application. It's just how the Internet of Things really works. So we're going to talk about 2 other apps that might sound a little odd to talk about, at least one of them. So Chris is going to talk about Snapchat and how the hell we can possibly use that for archaeology. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Snapchat recently has been receiving a lot of positive attention from entrepreneurs, and they're seeing it as a really on fire marketing tool. And so, for anybody not familiar with Snapchat, it's a temporary messaging system that you can send, either a private message that will expire after a set period of time, and you can change that period of time. It's always a few seconds. Or you can make it a public story, almost like the way you would update your Facebook with statuses, but you can make it, little vignettes of your day. And so that's the way people have been using it in their private life. It's been, up until recently, I think it's been receiving a lot of like criticism for like teens sexting each other or just a bunch of garbage, people
Mm-hmm.
goofing off. I like to joke around that Snapchat is the go dig a hole premium content platform. But anybody who does follow me knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But the serious marketing side of this is in the stories. There are channels and there's also a discover section, and so these channels in the discover section are from big name media outlets, MTV, Comedy Central, Vice, stuff like that. And then there's also a section for live events that are kind of like a viral trending thing. So like right now it's mid-March, we've got Spring Break Party On, Campaign Madness, I Heart London, and March Madness. And so the way that these things work is you can click on one, and it's just this like cycle of very quick small vignettes of like the zeitgeist of current events and things that might be relevant to the channel or the live event. And there's an option to click on each little vignette to see more. And so there will be like just a short story that gives you more information. And then you just exit right back out of that and keep going. And so it's a really interesting marketing tool to get like a lot of information out there very quickly. And it's really not that invasive. You opt in to see it, which
Mm-hmm.
is, I think that's what sets Snapchat apart from things like Facebook their marketing tends to be much more invasive, or Twitter, like now with sponsored posts and stuff, it's much more invasive. You don't have a choice. You have to, um, you have to see that kind of stuff. But with Snapchat, you opt in. And so the way I see this relating to archaeology is as a powerful public outreach tool. And so you could have like a summer field school or a public archaeology day or a conference, for example, and you could have all of the people on the dig site or at the conference snapping, and their snaps go to that event or that channel. And even though it is little vignettes that don't really have that much substance to them, these aren't heady pieces of content.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a little vignette. But that's the kind of thing that is really useful for the public to opt into and see these little vignettes and see, maybe what a archaeology looks like from start to finish, from digging a hole in the ground and screening, or surveying through the desert, to presenting that stuff at a conference. And so I think that archaeology could find a way to get on board and maybe find some success in marketing archaeology. But that still remains to be seen.
I think you're right because I've had Snapchat on my phone for I think probably a couple of years now, and never really used it much. I downloaded it because my brother-in-law was using it, and he sent me something, and I was like, all right, well, this is lame, and then I never used it again. And then and like you said, Chris, I saw a bunch of other outlets starting to use it more and more, and first off, I think Slapchat, that's probably a different app entirely.
I want that to exist.
Yeah.
I hope that's a thing.
All right, trademark Slapchat. All right, so anyway, I think it got a bad rap, just like, say, Dungeons and Dragons did when it first came out, and the urban legend of people killing themselves because their character died. Then all of a sudden, I couldn't play Dungeons and Dragons as a kid and I never did either, because my parents heard about something on the news, and all of a sudden the kids across the street were Satanists because they played Dungeons and Dragons. So that's how that came about, and that's pre-internet. That kind of stuff came down. So Snapchat started. There was a few stories about kids, sending naked pictures back and forth to each other because they would because Snapchat, it didn't used to be 24 hours. It used to be right after you watched it, it was gone. And, then that was it. Now it's 24 hours, and now you can screenshot it too, but they know you screenshotted it. So, anyway, it's becoming something different. And what you were talking about, Chris, I think you're right about outreach. And the way I see this, like, for example, I took a couple little video snaps while we were recording this podcast of kind of behind the scenes of recording the podcast. And that's the kind of thing I would normally have put on Instagram. But I feel like while some people don't mind that, I actually don't even like that when people do stuff like that, because that's like that's not really an Instagram worthy post. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the kind of thing that I like. Different social media has like kind of the best way to use it. And that's exactly what I think Snapchat is best at, is these little vignettes. And it's the kind of thing, like, I can take a 7-second update of me getting pulled over by a cop, or like sitting on the bus, or something like that. And that's the kind of thing that if I were to update my Facebook with a status of every mundane thing, even if it was something like, mildly exciting, like getting pulled over by a cop, that would be super annoying for anybody who follows me to see every mundane update. And there are people who use Facebook like that. And
for sure,
I think that Snapchat is much more entertaining, because rather than seeing somebody's posts every, 30 minutes or so while they're bored out of their mind on Facebook, you can hop over to Snapchat and you can see like a little 7-second video that's usually a little bit more entertaining or a little bit more informative. You just get a little bit more out of the medium. And if anybody follows Webby, follow Archaeowebby on Snapchat, because he's been posting some really great behind the scenes stuff about, like how we're using technology to, in your case, Webby, run a business and present archaeology, to your clients, and in technical reports and stuff like that. And also how we're bringing podcasting out. And so it's just like a neat little thing. And, to come back to your original comment, Webby, yeah, I think that, maybe it would be overload to your followers on Instagram or Facebook, stuff like that. But I think that Snapchat is, a pretty appropriate platform for it.
Well, and not only that, but like the immediacy of, say, the behind the scenes for this episode, nobody's going to care about this in like 3 years. This little video of this episode, they're going to listen to the episode, if anything. And so if I put it on Instagram, it's there forever. It's always going to be there. Whereas on Snapchat, if you didn't see this behind the scenes recording today, it's gone. It's not going to be there anymore. And I like that. And from like, say, an excavation standpoint, like a field school or something like that, I think that's also appropriate because, honestly, I can see a way people would use it too. They might be putting stuff up that clients might not want people to see, but if the client's on Snapchat, which is unlikely, then they'll see it. But if they're not, then your followers will get to see something, and then it's gone in 24 hours. So, there's that. It's deleted forever. But I'm thinking it more of like for field schools and things like that. It's a more of a bring you into the excavation and bring you into the immediate sort of, the present, rather than going back and looking through something that happened months or years ago. It feels like you're there, you know what I mean? And you can see stuff that happened in the last 24 hours. And I think that's pretty cool for the public.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think Snapchat definitely did a good job of taking something that obviously is getting a lot more popular, which is video, because now we all have a camera in our hands, and making it into more digestible pieces, instead of a YouTube where you're committing to a whole meal. You're able to just sort of take in little bits and snack on video clips, and that's what some people really want that. I am not a fan of Snapchat, but it's not that I don't get it. Like it's like Nickelback. I understand why it's popular. But there is almost zero chance that it will ever appeal to me as a person. And so, but I get it. And I think it's just about how you consume information, what you're more used to, what you prefer. And some people really, really like video. I'm a text guy. Like I just love reading, and I can, I like to kind of look at language and think of that there's a little bit more nuance to, somebody being able to really articulate what they want to say. And so that's just my thing. Video is entertaining to me, but I'm rarely in a position where I can watch a video with the audio on and not bother people around me or, something like that. So but I think it's a generational thing for one, and just a personal preference thing. So, but I think you all are right. It's a great tool for promoting something that's active, that's kinetic, where you're out in the field and things are happening, and that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's end this Snapchat discussion with one more sentence, and that sentence is, "Hey Siri, play songs by Nickelback." All right. Oh shit, my phone's doing it. All right.
You just punked yourself.
I really did. Yeah. I held it behind my back with my hand over the speaker. Oh, it's still doing it. Look at this right here. All right. God damn it.
Oh, yes.
I hope that worked for somebody else too. All right. Yeah, I thought I had that speaker covered really well. The microphones on these things are too good. Anyway, okay, so we're going to talk about one more app real quick here, and we can go through this relatively quickly. And this is actually something I'm pretty sure that Steve mentioned last time he was on, just kind of almost in passing, that your company uses. And I went and checked it out, and now I'm on 5 different teams, and I just absolutely love it. But it's called Slack, and to boil it down, it's a messaging application. Okay. But it's much more than that with the way that it organizes and integrates across all your devices. Plus there's the whole, like for example, for the Archaeology Podcast Network, I'm trying to talk to about 15 different people with this network, and they're all across the world. And some people like Facebook, some people don't. Some people use Facebook Messenger, some people don't. Some people use Skype for messaging, some people don't. Whatever. Slack is a nice sort of neutral application that doesn't have any baggage with it, that people can all use, no matter what platform you're on, whether it's a smartphone, a computer, or your tablet. You can download Slack and you can use it. And the ridiculously crazy thing about Slack is that for everything I've had to do so far, it's free. Okay. I'm not actually even sure. I'm looking at their pricing list right now. The next level up is the standard price, which is $667 per user. And that's if you get it billed annually if it's $8 a month if you don't. I'm not actually sure what I would even get that I need as far as these other features go, because with the current free plan, we can do channels, they call it, which are basically, rooms, if you want to look at it that way, where you can have different people on your team in there. You can make the channel private. You can speak privately to somebody else. You can do all that kind of stuff. Now, I don't know. They do have app integration too, where you can like integrate Skype with this for just as an example. So you can just from within Slack, and I haven't tried this, but from within Slack, you can call your entire group, just bam, right there. And so I don't know. Do you guys use any of that stuff, Steve? These extra features? Do you guys pay for Slack, or do you guys use the free version?
So we do use it. In fact, when you asked me, a little Slack notification popped up on my screen. So yeah, it's a little weird synergy there, but we absolutely use it as a team. It's essential to us coordinating, whether it's an event, whether it's a project, because everything is a project, really. I mean, whether it's a client project or we have something to plan, an event, or something we need to do as a company. And it's been invaluable to us. I know that we haven't really leveraged some of the paid features, because usually the paid is for companies that are at scale. They're trying to implement Slack in a much larger number of people, and sometimes that app integration that you were talking about. Sometimes I think there's a little bit of that in the monetization and part of it. Like maybe they open the API up to certain other apps that they're using, but it's been an invaluable tool for us to communicate with each other. A lot of really great features, and just so easy to use, and really looks nice too. I would encourage. In fact, the last podcast we did, I linked an article about how that design, the sort of secret sauce of Slack, and how it became a $1 billion company, and it's only grown since that podcast. It's only been getting more traction and more groundswell. So I think we're going to see it stick around for a long time.
Well, there must be something in the paid features, because I heard Slack mentioned, and this is why I wanted to talk about it today. I heard it mentioned on another podcast, an entrepreneur podcast, and it was they mentioned it in context of the next $1 billion companies, and it was mentioned with Facebook and Uber and I don't know, something else, and then Slack, and I was like, Slack, are you kidding me? I was like, I've been using this for like 4 months, I haven't paid a dime for it, and then I had to look and see. They don't even push the subscriptions, which is crazy. I had to search to find the pricing models. I mean, when I first signed up for it, there was no, hey, you want to upgrade to this? You want to do this? I was like, there was none of that. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. And looking at the free features, I mean, it seems like they could even reduce everything they're giving you for free by half, and it would still be amazing. Because the top feature here is search and browse your 10,000 most recent messages. I'll tell you what, if I got to go back more than 10,000 messages, I'm really digging in a hole here. And I mean, it would be cool, sure, to search the entire history, but 10,000's enough. So,
I mean, digging holes is what you do, though.
Right. So, and it says 10 service integrations. I'm not sure what that means, if that's that app integration that we were talking about, and 10 sounds like a lot.
Yeah.
Again, I'd have to have some of these other more advanced features even explained to me, because I don't even know what the heck they mean or what they could do for me. Which would be nice to have a Slack professional on at some point to really go into some of those details.
Yeah, well, a lot of its success is also about giving you control. Like you can control which notifications you get, which ones you see. There's a lot of user-controlled environment in there that makes it really personalized, and I think that was the key for it to grow its audience and get the traction that it's got.
Well, and another thing I like about this, just to wrap this up, is, like I said, I'm on 5 Slack teams, and once you go into your app, like on the smartphone, on the computer, I can see them all at once on the downloaded one I've got for my Mac. On my iPhone, I've got to swipe from the right, so swipe left, and switch teams. But the nice thing is, and I was worried about this, is that when I do get a notification in one of those teams that I'm not currently visible on my screen, like the phone's off, whatever, or closed, I still get the notification for that. I was worried that I'd have to be quote unquote in that team at the moment in the app to see its notifications, but it's smart enough to give you notifications for whatever teams you're on. So, which is pretty awesome. So anyway, check out Slack. Check out Snapchat. You can follow me on Snapchat at ARCHEOWEBBY. Chris, what's your Snapchat handle?
The Mighty Sims.
Oh my. Oh my! It's not Go Dig a Hole.
No.
The Mighty Sims. Nice.
I told you it's the premium content channel.
All right then, the Mighty Sims. I'm gonna put that in the show notes right now. Okay, so.
But my handle, by the way, is NICKELBACK. That's me.
Wow. That I don't doubt.
Now that's the premium content.
All right. Okay. Well, on that note, I was going to tell Siri to play something else, but I just don't want to turn my iPhone off right now. All right, guys. Well, thanks a lot, and we'll end this one and come back next time when we have to get more users after that Nickelback fiasco.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Yeah. Thanks for the time, Steve. I owe you a beer.
No worries.
All right.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
That's it for another episode of the Archaeotech Podcast. Links to some of the items mentioned on the show are in the show notes for this podcast, which can be found at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com/Archaeotech. If you like the show and want to comment, please do. You can leave comments about this or any other episode on the website or on the iTunes page for this episode. You can also email us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com or use the contact form on the podcast webpage. If you'd like us to answer a question on a future episode, email us. Use the contact form on the website or tweet your questions with the hashtag Archaeotech or tag @ArcPodNet in your tweet. Please share the link to this show wherever you saw it. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, you can do so on iTunes or on Stitcher Radio. You can also type the name of the podcast into your favorite podcasting app and subscribe that way. Don't forget to go over to iTunes and leave a review of the show. It helps us get noticed so more people can find our podcast and benefit from the content. Also, send us show suggestions and interview suggestions. We want this to be a resource for field technicians everywhere, and we want to know what you want to know about.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.archaeologypodcastnetwork.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
I had in mind the idea to go like super heady with like the materiality of the objects and then like shit like that, like some Ian Hodder bullshit. And then I was like, you know what? This isn't the right podcast for that.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.